Strange Brew Podcast, Season 1, Episode 344. It kind of feels like the dog days of winter, but we've got fall spring going on outside. We're going to be in the 40s and 50s this weekend. Baseball is back. We're going to talk about that on today's episode. Pitchers and catchers reported on Wednesday. We have Brewer content. We have Brewer audio. We've already got a Craig Counsell mashup from Cubs spring training that we can play you. So as we're flipping the calendar a little bit here to a warmer season, we'll discuss some baseball. We are going to talk about the Packers. I have an email about a topic we kind of hit on just a little bit in the Super Bowl recap, and the topic involves Brian Gutekunst, John Schneider, and Eliot Wolf. Did the Packers make a mistake, or did the Packers make potentially two mistakes? We're going to talk about Badger basketball. Huge matchup tonight after a massive win at number 8 Illinois on Tuesday in overtime. Michigan stay at the Kohl Center tonight. We're going to go over the Bucks. Are the Bucks back? The Bucks are just going to do the opposite of what we want them to do, depending on the time of year. We wanted them to win initially, then they started losing. We said, okay, then lose and get a better draft pick. And now they're saying, no, we're going to win. Now I'm going to win. They won 5 of their last 6. The Cam Thomas signing has worked out. He had a huge game in Orlando on Wednesday. And the Ousmane Dieng trade, which I don't know that anybody talked about outside of us maybe, when we got to the trade deadline and the Bucks pick up Ousmane Dieng, 22-year-old, 6'9" forward who was buried on the Thunder depth chart. Well, now he's getting playing time, and as it turns out, there might be a reason this guy was the 11th overall pick in 2022 because he is playing outstanding, and it doesn't look like a mirage to me. It's a small sample size, but it doesn't look like it's a fake good for the last 3 games. The Bucks win Orlando. They go into OKC last night, blow out the defending champions, and they didn't have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander or Jalen Williams, but the Bucks had no Giannis, no Ryan Rollins, no Miles Turner last night. We're going to talk about a resurgence there, and we will make our pick. Well, the B93 text line did. We'll make our pick for Daytona weekend this weekend. Let's go.
On the ground, a chance here. Durham to Hardy to first. In time! Yes! The Brewers win! Yes!
Here comes Melvin to the 25, to the 20, Gordon 15, 10, 5, touchdown! Wisconsin! Record-breaking run!
Morgan a smash up the middle, base hit to center. Here comes Gomez around third. A throw and the Brewers win!
Here's the snap. He looks, he throws, it's intercepted. And there is your Super Bowl dagger.
Booker the drive, gets inside, leans in, knocked away and stolen by Holiday. Phoenix has to foul, and a pinnacle ball throws it down.
Swinging fly ball in the right center. Broxton is there, and they're the champions. They have done it.
It's been a 50-year journey. Wisconsin, we've got a room at the top of the world tonight. The Milwaukee Bucks are NBA champions.
Yeah, welcome in Friday morning. It is false spring out there. That's what we've reached here this weekend in the middle of February, and I'm not going to be fooled this time around. We won't get fooled again. I'll probably get fooled. We know how this works. We get a little taste. We get to wet our beaks in early to mid-February, and then we think, oh boy, I wonder if it's going to get warm. Stupidly, like an idiot, like a blockhead, maybe this is going to be the beginning of spring. And then we're going to be back in the 20s, and there's going to be a cold weather advisory again at some point, and there will be a winter storm warning at some point, and we're going to get 3 to 5 inches of snow at some point. I mean, we're not done yet, but I do love me a false spring. I do love me a fake spring. And that's what we get. We get mid to upper 40s today, which is going to feel like 60. We get mid to upper 40s on Saturday, maybe 50 on Sunday with sun, maybe grilling on Sunday. President's Day looks like mid-50s. I think some of our state's going to be touching 60 on Monday, and then some 50s and 40s on Tuesday, Wednesday. Then we're back to the 30s. And yeah, you know it's going to be winter for a couple of weeks yet, but false spring, fake spring, I love it. Then we'll get winter back. Then we'll get second spring. Then that'll be a trick. Then we'll get winter back again. And then on the third go-round, then we'll finally have spring. It does kind of feel like a Day Beers day today. Day Beers. But welcome in. Hopefully everybody had a good work week out there, is having a decent work week. Wrapping it up here today, getting set for Valentine's weekend. You ready for Valentine's weekend? Don't forget, as we told you, we warned you, as I think everybody has, next year, Valentine's Day is Super Bowl Sunday. So if you're going to forget that, and Valentine's Day really means something to the person in your life, make sure you hit a home run this year so when you screw up next year, you can say, but we'll remember last year and how romantic that was, how great that was. So just be aware of that. That is next year's Super Bowl Sunday on Valentine's Day. Yeah, Valentine's weekend. We've got pitchers and catchers reporting. It's starting to turn. It's staying light out now past like 5:30. Things are turning in the right direction. So we have a couple of emails I want to get to. I guess we could, this is almost going to be like a mailbag episode, I guess. We've got 3 I'm going to get to. Well, I knew one of them, this Packer one, I got right out of Monday's episode, so I wanted to load this up for Friday. The Gutey, Schneider, Eliot, Wolf conversation. But then I got an email yesterday afternoon about a blog we wrote about James Van Der Beek, really sad. And then I also got an email about curling and the Olympics going on. Team curling happening right now. Mixed doubles curling wrapped up on Tuesday, I'm pretty sure, with the Americans getting the silver. Probably could have had gold. Should have had gold. But they get the silver, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. But we can start with this one. This is from Dave in Sheboygan. So yesterday, we wrote a blog about the sad passing of James Van Der Beek, 48 years old. That's it. I remember that he had announced, or there was an article about the fact that he had been diagnosed with cancer in 2024, and it's colorectal cancer. And this whole story is going to make me want to get this checked out early in my life, I think, because I'm 41. I will turn 42 in June. I do an annual physical now. I'm getting better with that. I think dudes between the ages of 21, when is it that you're off your parents' insurance? I would say guys between the ages of 18, 19, 20, and their mid to late 30s are not great with going to the doctor. I don't think I went to the doctor between the age of 22 and 37. But now I've been going every year. You get the physical every year. You get the blood drawn every year. You got to do that kind of stuff. And every year, as I get closer to 45, my doctor, she will tell me, it's recommended you get a colonoscopy or whatever at 45, but there's no history in your family and you're not 45 yet. But I am going to be asking more, I think, this time around when I go in April, because that's what he was diagnosed with. And if you read the James Van Der Beek story where he talks about this diagnosis, he said that he was doing a cold plunge, he was in great shape, and he just had some abnormalities with his bowel movements that just concerned him a bit, so he got it checked out, and he was stage 3 already. So perfectly healthy, great shape, still pretty much the prime of your life in your mid-40s, and then that hits. And this feels like one of those cancers that is becoming more and more prevalent, and it is one that seems to hide itself until it is very far down the line, and there's not a whole lot you can do about it. So I will be bringing that up again. I know Cologuard, you poop in a box, right? Here's some poop in a box. I've heard varying reports about how easy that is and how effective it really is to figure out if you are in the early stages or whatever. Maybe we could do that, poop in a box. But I will be asking about that because this story, when you read about it in totality, and there's a lot of stories like it, but because he's a celebrity and a movie star and a TV star, then it becomes a bigger conversation. And when I read that, I thought, I am definitely asking about that because I'll be seeing my doctor. I'll see her, I think, a month before I turn 42. But he got diagnosed at 45 years old in perfect health, and he's gone 18 months later. And this was a hit for the 90s kids. So the email I have relates to a blog that I wrote yesterday. I was not a Dawson's Creek guy. I know for a lot of people my age, late 30s, early 40s, mid 40s, when you think of James Van Der Beek, you think of Dawson's Creek. Indisputably one of the biggest shows, maybe the biggest show in WB, right? Was on the WB or CW. One of the biggest shows in that network's history, one of the biggest shows of the late 90s, early 2000s. As I wrote in the blog, the only thing I know about Dawson's Creek is the crying Dawson meme, which I have used frequently in my life. And I know in the end, spoiler alert, the Katie Holmes character Joey picks Charlie Conway. She picks Pacey over Dawson, even though it looked like her and Dawson were going to ride off into the sunset. That was going to be the happy ending. But I don't know enough about it. I know people were upset that that was the way the series ended. But I have maybe seen 2 full episodes of Dawson's Creek in my life. Dawson's Creek, the theme song. Can I get it loaded up here quick? Dawson's Creek theme song. This does hit. And I think it's because this was actually a single. I think this was on the radio. When Dawson's Creek was going. Yeah, this was the Dawson's Creek theme. Who is this even? How much of this can we play? 45 seconds? This is Paula Cole? Is Paula Cole the Where Have All the Cowboys Gone singer? One of the worst songs. One of the worst catchy songs of all time. Kind of like this song. But this was the intro to Dawson's Creek. I was never a Dawson's Creek guy. And that's as much as we can play. But while I'm not a Dawson's Creek guy, like a lot of folks in the late 90s, I am a huge Varsity Blues guy. And anytime that is on TV, I will watch it. So I put that in the blog yesterday. We put some Johnny Mox. Jonathan, I like that too about his character. His character's name is Jonathan, spelled like I spell my name, Jonathan. Here's a little Mox.
Let's go out there, and we'll play the next 24 minutes for the next 24 minutes. And we'll leave it all out on the field. We got the rest of our lives to be mediocre, but we have the opportunity to play like gods for the next half of football. But we can't be afraid to lose. There's no room for fear in this game. And we go out there, and we half-ass it because we're scared. All we're left with is an excuse. We're always going to wonder. But we go out there, and we give it absolutely everything. That's heroic. Let's be heroes.
That gets you fired up, Mox.
Come on.
I cannot believe three of those characters, Paul Walker, James Vanderbeek, and I forget the guy who played Billy Bob. Shame on me, but he's just Billy Bob. They've all passed away. Three primary characters in that late 90s classic movie, Varsity Blues. But that was a movie that we all enjoyed. That line where he says we've got the rest of our lives to be mediocre, boy. B93. I may turn that into a morning show liner. We have the rest of our lives to be mediocre, or statistically less than that. Anyway, so he passed, and that was sad. But that's where I remember him from the most, is Varsity Blues. And he's in a lot of other stuff. He did some cameos on How I Met Your Mother, which we're going to play a clip from here in a second. Not his clip, but from a different thing. He had a great run there. I know he was on Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23, right? He was on that. He popped up a lot of places. But I think of him as Mox from Varsity Blues. So with that in mind, I wrote a blog of that, and then I did a quick top 5 ranking. I probably could have been more expansive about it, but we don't have as much time to blog. I have gotten back to it, and I have stuck with it since the turn of the year. I think I've missed one day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, since the turn of the calendar year. So maybe years ago, I would have spent a lot more time putting together a top 10 list or a top 15 list, but I ripped off a quick top 5 fictional quarterbacks that you would want to lead your fictional team to save your fictional life. Which of these 5? These are my 5. So I had Matthew Saracen in there from the TV show Friday Night Lights. I probably should have had him higher, but in between working shifts at the Alamo Freeze, he led East Dillon to a state championship as the backup quarterback, and a very similar story to Varsity Blues where the star quarterback gets hurt, Saracen comes in. Then at number 4, I had Willie Beeman from Any Given Sunday. Way underrated sports movie, way underrated football movie, way underrated movie. One of the best performances of Al Pacino's career. I know those are maybe stupid words, but I stand by them when you think of what he's all accomplished. But he was so good as the head coach in that movie. So that was my number 4, Jamie Foxx, Willie Beeman. Then my number 3 was Uncle Rico. My wife took exception to the fact that I threw in a throwaway. She's right. I should have had Uncle Rico as number 5. It's kind of the funny one where I could put the gif of him filming himself throwing the ball over the mountains and throwing the steak and hitting Napoleon in the face. One of the funniest parts of that movie is when he takes Kip's steak and just absolutely squares up Napoleon in the dome when he's riding his bike back home. I should have had the stupid one at number 5 and had Saracen at 3, but I was just moving too quick. So we had Uncle Rico at number 3. We would have won state if I wouldn't have gotten hurt. And then at number 2, I had Shane Falco of The Replacements, Keanu Reeves. I did put in the blog, if I had to pick an actual actor of all those people who have acted as quarterbacks, if I had to have the actual actor lead a football team on a fourth quarter drive for a game-winning touchdown, I think I do take Keanu Reeves because by all accounts, if you watch any of the DVD extras, it's from a bygone era, this podcast, if you watch any of the DVD extras from The Replacements or any of the extras from Point Break, where he also plays a quarterback, Johnny Utah, he was slinging it on the set of The Replacements. Like, it looked like he could have actually been a quarterback. Fun fact, which I put in the blog, which I think we've talked about from time to time on the air, not sure if on the podcast, the quarterback, the former NFL quarterback who was on the set of The Replacements to make sure everything looked authentic and to give a little tutoring to Keanu Reeves, the quarterback that was on that set is none other than former Packer backup quarterback legend T.J. Rubley, who got into one game in Minnesota when Favre got hurt in the middle of the game. He turned the ball over like 4 times and they lost the game. And then we never heard from T.J. Rubley again. He wore number 12. He wore Aaron Rodgers number 12. Need to get a T.J. Rubley jersey maybe. But you got to find an authentic one. I don't want to make one on Temu. I don't want to make one because that's obvious. I want to find, does anybody out there have an actual authentic T.J. Rubley Packer jersey? Have to maybe hit up eBay today. Sounds like a busy afternoon for your boy. But that was the quarterback whisperer on the set of The Replacements. But he would be my number 2, Shane Falco. And I think you could make a really good case for Shane Falco being number 1. Number 1 was Johnny Mox. As I put in the blog, you could tell he had the arm strength when he whips it from the sideline when he's reading Slaughterhouse-5, which also makes me laugh all the time. As I put in the blog, too, there was no bigger book in the late 90s, early 2000s. If you were a dude in your late teens, early 20s, and you wanted to cosplay as an intellectual, that was the book, Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-5. It is a very good book. I would recommend it to anybody. But it did become one of those books for guys of that age in that era. Oh, a little highbrow. Like you feel like you're Goodwill Hunting or something, reading Slaughterhouse-5. But we saw the arm strength. I like that he's a little cavalier. I like that he can mix it up and he can think on the fly where he couldn't get the play call. He calls his own play. As I put in the blog, too, I like how he kept his composure. When Allie Larder came out in the whipped cream bikini, he easily could have fallen into something there, but he didn't. He stayed true for the most part. There was a kiss maybe, but what are you going to do? But then I also put in the blog, he also kind of passed on a once-in-a-lifetime with late 90s Allie Larder, so he's also kind of a dum-dum. But he showed poise there, and as Kramer told us many years ago, poise counts. He's my number 1. Now, let's get to the email. Emailer said, this is Dave in Plymouth, said, John, read your fictional quarterback power ranking. Absolute travesty that Sunshine in Remember the Titans was not on there. Yeah, that was maybe an oversight. Again, if I had more time, if more of my day was dedicated to blogging the way that it used to be, I think I would have gone through a lot more stuff. Yeah, I just flat forgot about Sunshine.
See it if these boys can fight a war together. They can play football together. Now, he's a pretty good runner.
Yeah, fruitcake, huh?
I think we can find a place for you, boy. With 1 or 2 conditions.
Gotta cut that air. Sunshine!
Sunshine.
That's such a good movie, too. Yeah, I forgot about Sunshine. There are a bunch of blogs like that. I saw Joe Kane from The Program. Didn't mention him. Who's number 1 on this list? They've got Mox at 6. Oh, Joe Pendleton at Heaven Can Wait. That's a late 70s movie. Reno Hightower in The Best of Times. Kurt Russell as the quarterback. Willie Beeman is their number 2. And their number 1 is who? Oh, Paul Crewe in The Longest Yard. Okay. All right, whatever. I stand by Mox as my number 1, but I did forget Sunshine on that list. Yeah, that was sad news, Vanderbeek. And Vanderbeek was apparently a big Packer fan. I did not know that until we started reading more about it when he passed this week. And apparently, as he became a Packer fan, he just kind of fell in love with the 90s Packers. Who didn't? Who didn't love Favre in that era and Frankie Bag o' Donuts Winters and Mark Chimura before Hot Tub Gate and all those guys, Reggie? So apparently he was number 4 in the movie Varsity Blues as Jonathan Mox, as Mox. He did that as a tip of the cap to Favre and his love of the Packers and Brett Favre. I did not know any of that until this week. So that was the email from Dave. Then real quick, we'll talk just a little bit Olympics and a little bit of Olympics curling. We had mixed doubles wrapped up on Tuesday. It is only the 3rd Olympics or Olympiad. It's only the 3rd time, so 2018, 22, and 26, that mixed doubles curling has been an event at the Olympics. Curling's been around for a long time. Just the 4-person team. 4-person, 4 men, 4 women. But mixed doubles is relatively new, and that wrapped up on Tuesday with the Corys, Corey Dropkin and Corey Tisi, and they had Sweden in the gold medal match on Tuesday afternoon. I forget what their names are, and I'm not going to try to pronounce them anyway, but the Swedish guy as a part of that tandem looked like an all-time diehard villain, and then the woman on that Swedish team was an assassin. She did not miss anything in that match. Now, the Americans should have won, in my curling opinion, and again, my wife and I have been curlers now for a decade plus at the Milwaukee Curling Club, and I concede we can't do 90% of what you see on Olympic curling, on mixed doubles curling, on the four-person curling. While I understand the concept behind what they're doing and the strategy behind it, some of the shots they take, we would never even think of in our leagues. And I know we talked about this last week, right? There is brain rot at the amateur curling level, at the club curling level with the Olympics, because all of us are watching it because we play it, so then you watch the best curlers in the world, and then you get to a Thursday night league like I was in last night, and because people have been watching these unbelievable shots in mixed doubles curling and in team curling, everybody thinks, whoa, I could run that rock back and hit that other rock, and then I angle that one out, and boom, 3 rocks are out, and we score a point. And it just never works out. But there is that problem when you have Olympic curling on all the time, and it's on at the club all the time. The club-level curlers start to think, oh, I can do this, and we cannot do that. But we are watching it a lot. But in my opinion, in the 8th end, the final end of the mixed doubles gold matchup, they had it. I mean, Team USA had it. And they just missed 3 shots in a row. The guy Corey, he missed his last 2 shots. In mixed doubles, one person shoots the 1st and 5th shots, and one person shoots 2, 3, 4. And in 4-person curling, it's 8 stones on each side. All players shoot 2. Take 2 shots. But in mixed doubles, one person is the 1-5, one is the 2-3-4. And you can rotate those. You can change every other end. You can change the order if you want. But the last 3 shots, so the guy Corey's last 2, so the 3rd and 4th shots of the end, and then woman Corey's last shot, they just missed fractionally, but that's all it takes. And then I remember on Corey TC's last shot, the crowd, who was maybe more casual fans, I'm sure there are some diehard curling fans that are there, but there were probably some casual, just American fans, and when she hit that shot, at that time, they were sitting shot where they could have scored one and won the gold medal, and the crowd was going nuts, but anybody who has curled, and you could tell they knew too. The Coreys knew. Her shot spilled out too far. It was an easy take for the Swedish team. And as I said, that woman on Team Sweden was an assassin, a sniper. And when I saw how far that rock came out, I thought, well, this is over. They've lost. And they knew that too. It's just funny when you are watching with somebody who doesn't follow it or hasn't curled, or you hear the crowd in the background that has maybe more casual fans. They're going, oh my God, yeah, they're going to win. No, they're not. No, they're not. But if they would have hit any one of those last 3 shots or been reasonably closer, I believe they would have won, and they would have won gold. Now they get silver, and Corey TC, woman Corey, that is the first female in Olympic curling history in the U.S. to win a medal. So that's history. They did fantastic. They've won national championships, too, and world championships or competed at world championships. I think those two will be back. They're both pretty young. I think both of them are either in their late 20s, early 30s. My guess is they'll be back in 2020, 2030. Yeah, this will be the last one in the 2020s, John. I think they'll be back in 2030, and they'll compete again for a gold medal. That was a lot of fun to watch, but yeah, just a fractional miss is late, but when you're playing that high level, you cannot miss fractionally. So that wrapped up mixed doubles on Tuesday, but I had an email from Brad in Sheboygan. He asked, John, do you and your wife do that mixed doubles curling? We do, and we'll be doing it tomorrow, Saturday afternoon at the Milwaukee Curling Club. Mixed doubles curling is a good way to spend time with your partner, to spend time with your spouse, to get in an argument on the ice about a bad shot or a bad call, and then to ride home in the car silently on the way back home. It'll be a great Valentine's Day for us. It is true. You know, in 4-person curling, typically I'm shooting either 1, 2, or 3. The last person to shoot rocks on a 4-person team is called the skip. That's the team captain. That's the person that's always calling the shots on the other end of the ice. And then they're the money shooters. They have the last 2 shots to either score or not score in all likelihood. They have the money shots at the end of it. I am not. I've done that, but I'm not that person typically. In regular 4-person curling, I love being a 1 or a 2 because the 3 helps out the skip and calls shots for the skip or helps line things up for the skip. And those last 2 shots, so rocks 5 and 6, they're pretty big too. I like being a 1 or a 2. There's no pressure. You can't lose an end really. Well, you kind of can, but you can't at our level. You can't lose by misfiring on rocks 1 through 4, and then you're just a grunt. And I like that. I like being a grunt. If you're person 1 or 2 on a 4-person curling team, you throw your rocks, hopefully you hit them or give your team something to work with, and then you just sweep when you're told, and you stop sweeping when you're told, and that's it. That's the extent of it. I like grunt work like that. I don't want to think. I just want someone to tell me what to do and tell me when to stop doing that thing and tell me when to start doing it again. In mixed doubles curling, because there's only 2 of you, you're both mentally into every single shot. Your shots, the opponent's shots, you're trying to figure out the angles, and it's a much more mentally exhausting version of it because there's only 2 people and every shot means a ton. So yes, sometimes when it gets really tight in a close game and I miss a shot or I'm light on something or I'm too far outside or we disagree on a strategy, yeah, sometimes it's a quiet ride home. It's a nice time to spend together, though. But we do. It's on Saturday afternoons in our club, and that's something we do. I think it's maybe 4 or 5 weeks a semester. Weekend curling kind of gets screwed up because every tournament or every site has bonspiels, has tournaments, and that disrupts mixed doubles curling on Saturdays. But yeah, I would say 5 times in fall and 5 times in spring. We'll be doing it tomorrow on Valentine's Day, and we'll see if we're in a good mood heading back home or not. But we do that. Thank you, Brad. So let's just start with the Packer question and just keep on rolling with the emails here. Then we'll go Brewers. Big news for William Contreras yesterday as pitchers and catchers reported to Maryvale. Then we'll talk about the Bucks, then the Badgers, then we'll get our Daytona pick. Now, this Packer question is from Jim and Kohler, I think our first Kohler emailer. He said, John, you talked about it a little bit on Monday's episode about the battle of former Packer player personnel guys in the Super Bowl, John Schneider versus Eliot Wolf. Is it safe to say at this point the Packers made a mistake in letting both of those guys go? Yes. You have to say that, right? I mean, at this point, you would have to say it's a mistake. Now, I don't think it's all on the Packers and their presidents at the time. Timing plays into this a little bit. But when you look at the resumes now of John Schneider, who has been in Seattle since 2010, and Eliot Wolf, who's only been the director of player personnel, I don't think that in the power structure of the Patriots, they actually have a GM. They just have a director of player personnel. And that's what Eliot Wolf is, Ron Wolf's kid, and he was in Green Bay for a long time. He has only been in New England since 2024. Schneider's been in Seattle, I think, since 2010. We'll pull up his wiki page here in a second. So when you look at their resumes, Schneider now has won 2 championships in Seattle, and I think he won GM of the Year or Executive of the Year, whatever the award is in the NFL. And now Eliot Wolf, in just his second year as the de facto GM in New England, he has taken his team to a Super Bowl. Brian Gutekunst has been the general manager in Green Bay since 2018. They have not been to a Super Bowl yet. They've been to a couple of NFC championship games, and they were knocking on the door and couldn't get the job done. So if you're just basing this on resume, if you're just blind resumeing and saying, of these 3 guys, which one, rank these guys 1 through 3, and you give their career accomplishments or the accomplishments of the teams they're in charge of during their time there, I think anybody who's anybody would rank Schneider 1, Eliot Wolf 2, and Gutey 3. Just based on the fact that Schneider has been to 3 Super Bowls and won 2, and Eliot Wolf has been to 1 Super Bowl, and Gutey has not been, and that's going to be the overwhelming favorite, regardless of the fact that Gutey's been GM for longer than Wolf has and all that, those kind of details. If you asked any NFL fan to rank those resumes, Gutey would be 3rd. And I don't think Brian Gutekunst is a bad GM. I don't think he's as good as he thinks he is, but I think that's a part of becoming a GM in the NFL. You have to have that confidence, otherwise you wouldn't make it that far. I don't think he's bad. I think he has been pretty good with free agency. Remember, he made those big splashes in 2019 where he brought in the Smith brothers and brought in Billy Turner. Who was the other guy? Adrian Amos. He's made moves, way more free agent moves than Ted Thompson did, but that didn't take much. That took maybe 1 or 2 moves in totality, and that surpassed what Ted Thompson had invested in free agency. Ted Thompson, say what you want about him, though. The 2 big ones both paid off. Charles Woodson, part of a Super Bowl champion, won Defensive Player of the Year. And Julius Peppers had a great run, too. He made a couple of those shrewd moves, but he did not make them often. But Gutey has been pretty good with that. I think Gutey has been pretty good with trades, and the Micah Parsons trade probably puts him over the top there. I do feel like you could go back in the draft history, and at some point, didn't we do that starting in 2018? And when you look at the draft history, recent drafts have been better. But 2018, nothing is left over from there at this point, I don't think. Not a lot from 2019, 2020. Jordan Love is the last guy standing. 2021, not a lot of guys left from there. 22 was the Romeo Dobbs and Christian Watson, and some of those guys are sticking. The drafts have been better recently, but you can definitely poke holes in his drafting over the course of his time as the Packer GM. So when you go back and look at John Schneider, I think a part of the Schneider conversation is the fact that the timing never worked out. So John Schneider is a Wisconsin guy. He went to high school in De Pere. He was a Packers scout from 93 to 96. So technically he has a ring from the Super Bowl 31 championship team. And then he went to Kansas City for a little bit. Then he went to Seattle for a year. Then Washington. Then he came back to Green Bay as the right-hand man to Ted Thompson from 2002 to 2007. And then he was promoted not only to that, but to director of football operations from 08 to 09. And then after the 2009 season, that was the year the Packers made the playoffs, and it was clear Aaron Rodgers was becoming something. I don't know that we thought he'd be a Hall of Famer, 4-time MVP, Super Bowl champion, whatever, but it felt like it was an upward trajectory. He left after that year to become the Seahawks general manager and executive vice president. So Schneider was not a part of the 2010 Super Bowl 45 title-winning team. That's a part of the John Schneider conversation. It sounds to me, from everything I've read about Schneider's time with Green Bay, from when he was a scout in 93, and then, like I said, left for a little bit, came back. From that time in 93, all the way through him being the top aide to Thompson and the director of football operations in 2009, all reports are everybody knew he had a bright future. Everybody knew he was going to be a future GM. Everybody knew he had a great brain for this. But the timing just wasn't there, and at no point before he left in 2009 was there any thought that he was going to take over for Ted Thompson, because Ted Thompson had just started in 2005 as the GM for the Packers, and it looked like he was building something and doing it primarily through the draft. So when he left in 2009, there was no chance for him really to become the GM in Green Bay. Now, it is my understanding, so he's been the GM in Seattle from 2010 to now, and he has the executive vice president designation, and now he is the president of football operations as well. He got that in 2024. But he has been the GM from 2010 all the way through now. And he built the Legion of Boom teams that went to 2 Super Bowls and won 1, and he built the current team that has now won the 2nd Super Bowl in franchise history. It is my understanding that he had written into his contract at some point early in his time in Seattle, and you can Google this, you can verify it. It is my understanding that John Schneider had an out clause in his Seattle contract for one team and one team only. And that is, if the general managership opened in Green Bay, he could leave Seattle and go back home. Because, like I said, he's a Wisconsin native. This is the team he pulled for growing up. Obviously, a big connection to Ron Wolf and the scouting department. So he had that specifically written into his contract that if that job ever became available, that he could leave the Seattle job and take the Green Bay job if it were offered to him, which you would think it would have been, but it wasn't. Now, I don't know. It is also my understanding that when Ted Thompson retired, was forced out after the 2017 season, and they went through the hiring process in 2018, it is my understanding that that clause no longer existed in his Seattle contract. So he had been in Seattle at that point for 8 years. My guess is he was on his 2nd or 3rd contract. As I said, they had been to 2 Super Bowls, won 1 Super Bowl. It wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that the Seahawks would at that point say, we're not going to give you that out anymore. This is clear. You're our guy. We love having you here. 2 Super Bowls, a championship. We feel like we can rebuild this thing. So it wouldn't stun me if that clause were gone 8 years into his tenure in Seattle. But all reports indicate, at least early in Seattle, he had that out, and he had that love for Green Bay, that if it were offered to him as a Packer, he would go back to Green Bay. So, in my mind, it just never worked out timing-wise. So you can say, yeah, we'd prefer to have John Schneider as the GM in Green Bay over Brian Gutekunst. That is not an insane thing to say. If that were the offer right now, if you just said, John, you have the power, I have the power, you have He-Man powers over the Packer general managership for 1 hour, what's the move you make? You can do anything you want to do. You can take any GM from any team and put them back in Green Bay. I don't know that many Packer fans wouldn't take John Schneider this second and fire or move on from Brian Gutekunst. But I just don't think the timing worked out. There was no way he was going to get that job in 2010. And then by the time it got to a point where Ted Thompson was retiring, I don't think that clause existed where he could just leave, and he wasn't going to quit Seattle and come back. It just never worked out. It's two ships passing in the night. Not to say at some point we couldn't get there. Schneider is only 54 years old, which in the realm of being a GM in the NFL probably has, if he wants it, 10-plus years left there. And if the Packers don't win a Super Bowl soon, or at least make a Super Bowl soon, you've got to assume, even with the contract extension, that Gutey and LaFleur and all those guys could be on the hot seat. So could there be some reunion there? I wouldn't totally rule it out. But if you're a Packer fan saying, man, it'd be nice to have John Schneider and not Brian Gutekunst, I agree with you, but I don't know if there's a world where that was a real possibility. Now, Eliot Wolf, on the other hand, he interviewed for the job in 2018, and it looked like he was a finalist for that job. Ron Wolf's son, obviously, he had been a scout for Green Bay for a long, long time. And just because of the Wolf last name, it was my feeling at the time and still today that he had a really good chance to get that job. Now, there are some stories out there that seem to indicate that there was a little bit of, I guess, bad blood in the hiring process between Mark Murphy and Ron Wolf, and for that reason, they weren't going to give Eliot Wolf the job, or they didn't want it to look like nepotism or whatever. There are unwritten stories about that I have just heard second and third hand from people that I know that cover the team, that maybe there was never really a chance they were going to hire Eliot Wolf for a variety of reasons. But Eliot Wolf does not get that job, and they go with Gutey in 2018, and eventually Eliot Wolf, I think he sticks on for a little bit. He goes and does a bunch of different stuff, and then he ends up in New England 2 years ago, and he helps build this team and draft Drake May, and now they're in the Super Bowl a couple of years into his tenure. If you're asking me right now, do I take Eliot Wolf over Brian Gutekunst? I do not. Even though I acknowledge what we just talked about, if you blind resumed the three GMs and you asked anybody to rank them 1 through 3, 95% of people are going to rank Gutey third. I right now do not take Eliot Wolf over Gutey. I don't know that it's a landslide, though. And if the Patriots continue to build and have success and they've revamped the offensive line and they're back in the AFC Championship game next year with a really young quarterback, or they make another Super Bowl run, if that happens next year and the Packers are out again in the wild card round, or they win a division but they're out at home or whatever it is, then I might revisit this in a year. Right now, I would say I am sticking with Gutey over Eliot Wolf, but it is a fair email and a fair point brought up by Jim and Kohler about maybe the Packers missed there a couple of times. I just don't think John Schneider, as much as we'd love to live in that world, I don't think that was ever a real possibility. And Eliot Wolf, it just didn't sound like, for as young as he was, and maybe there was some other stuff going on in the background there, it didn't feel like they were ever going to hire him in 2018. But that's one you can revisit and say, you had a chance. If Eliot Wolf goes on and the Patriots win a couple of championships in the next 10 years and he's the architect behind it, that's one you could realistically go back to in 2018, because he interviewed for the job and he was a finalist for it, and say, they missed there. They missed. They made the wrong decision. They should have stuck with Eliot Wolf and not gone with Gutey. Fair question all the way around, and it was something we brought up, I think, briefly on the Monday podcast as we recap the Super Bowl. I did have another email. Where is it here? It is from Chris in Sheboygan. And it simply said, is Desmond Ridder the backup quarterback next year? That's a really good question. I don't know. I guess I don't hate it. Malik Willis is gone. I mean, Gutey talked about that during his press conference. That was kind of the one thing he said, not that it was a stunner, but in 40 minutes of gaslighting, in 40 minutes of saying absolutely nothing, which as a podcaster and a morning show host on radio, I almost tip my cap to. I feel like I can say nothing in 40 minutes. He really said nothing in 40 minutes. One thing he did acknowledge, though, is that, we're probably going to lose Malik Willis. Technically, he's a free agent already. Some other team is going to give him a chance to start based on what he's been able to accomplish as a backup quarterback in Green Bay. I just hope it's not Minnesota. I do think there's a real chance, because is J.J. McCarthy the guy? I don't know that anybody in Minnesota can say definitively yes or no, but signing Malik Willis to a $10 million a year deal over a 2 or 3 year deal, bring him in to compete, I don't hate that if I'm Minnesota. I do hate it if I'm Green Bay. I would like to see him go to the AFC. I don't know what that team would be, but I'd like to see him go to Miami maybe. But he is going to get a chance to at least compete for a starting job. And even though a lot of Packer fans wish that happened in Green Bay, that is not a realistic world either. That's the John Schneider world. That's not a realistic world. He is going to be gone. So who is the backup quarterback going to be? You've had this luxury now, and we didn't know it at the time when they traded a 7th rounder for Malik. We didn't know what he was going to do as a backup. But we had this luxury the last 2 years of having a competent or above average, or we'll find out next year, maybe a starting level caliber quarterback as the backup. He led you to a couple of wins. He came in the middle of games and led you to wins. He had 6 touchdowns, I think, and no picks, and he could run the ball. He was a dual threat. That's a luxury. The years or the days of Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, for the most part, with the exception of, 2 years and a concussion maybe in 2010, he fracture his collarbone in 2013, and then in 2017, what was it? Was it an arm injury there too? I forget. Or a knee injury? It's my knee. I don't think that was that one. But for the most part, Rodgers was very durable during his time in Green Bay. Not as durable as the Iron Man, but there was a lot that went into that. It was a different world in the NFL too, where Brett Favre would get his head knocked in, and they'd give him a smelling salt, pat him on the ass, and get him back out there. It was just a different world overall. Brett Favre would have never missed that game. Was Rodgers in 2010, he got hit in the head in Detroit, and then that was the next week in New England, he missed that game against Brady. And that was the Matt Flynn game, and that was the game where that Patriot offensive lineman almost returned a kick for a touchdown. We should have known then special teams was going down the crapper. I think we probably did. But that was one of the lowlights, and there have been a lot of those. But if it were a Favre era, for sure he would have been playing that game against New England. So it's a different world, but I don't think we live anymore in a world where you can feel 100% confident that Jordan Love is going to play every single one of the 17 games in the upcoming schedule. He'll maybe play 14 or 15. It would be great if he played 17, but that almost feels like the exception to the rule now that you get a quarterback that plays all 17 games. That's a stroke of luck if you can get them to play every single game. So the likelihood is you're going to have to play a backup quarterback at some point, whether it's a start, whether it's coming in the middle of a game, whether it's coming in for a drive or two. And we have had this luxury of having someone that we count on, that we trust, and for many Packer fans, somebody that when he comes in, you're going to hear people say, well, now we finally have a quarterback in the game. Finally, thank God. We had that. Is Desmond Ridder going to be that? He's a former starter in Atlanta. He was Luke Fickell's quarterback in Cincinnati when they made the run to the college football playoffs, which ultimately led him to Wisconsin. So if things continue to spiral at Wisconsin, you can thank Desmond Ridder, Packer backup quarterback, for a lot of the profile that Luke Fickell built up. He led that team to a top 4 finish, and he led Cincinnati to the college football playoffs. And then he was a starter in Atlanta a little bit. He had a cup of coffee somewhere else. They signed him late in the year. I don't know that he was ever active for a game. Maybe he was in Week 17. I don't know. Why wouldn't he have played then in Minnesota? But right now, he would be the guy. Could Matt LaFleur develop him? Because I would say Malik Willis, very similar to Desmond Ridder, was a high-profile guy coming out of college. He was a second-round pick, right? And Tennessee had designs on him being their starting quarterback. It didn't work out there, and that's why the Packers were able to get him for a 7th-rounder. When Malik Willis came to Green Bay, I feel like my thought was the same as it was when Desmond Ridder came. Here's a washed-up quarterback. He's still kind of young. Maybe he can be a backup. Now, can you turn Desmond Ridder into Malik Willis? I guess that would be a task for Matt LaFleur, but right now he's the guy. I would think there will be an extensive look, and they're probably going to draft at least one guy. Whether they spend an early-round pick on it, probably not, because you don't have a first-round pick because of the Parsons trade. So I don't think you're going to spend a high draft pick on a quarterback, but maybe a 6th or 7th round pick. But yeah, right now Desmond Ridder would be the guy. Maybe LaFleur can do it. Maybe LaFleur can do what he did. He developed Love. He developed Wills. Say what you want about Matt LaFleur, and we've said plenty about his in-game strategy, his clock management, whether or not he's a leader of men, hand up, it's on me, all of that stuff. I think at this point, we can safely say one thing with certainty. He is good at developing quarterbacks. He developed Jordan Love into, even though he hasn't been to one yet, a Pro Bowl level quarterback. He had developed Malik Willis into one of the best backups in the league, and now we'll see where he goes from here. Could he do the same with Desmond Ridder? Why not? I would think Desmond right now is the guy, though. Thanks to that email as well. The email again is strangebrewpod@aol.com. Now, let's talk about the Brewers. Before we hop into the Brewers, I just saw this on my timeline on, where am I here? Oh, I forgot to play this, How I Met Your Mother. For the Eliot, Wolf, Gutey, Schneider conversation, did we choose poorly?
You chose poorly.
Did we? Maybe. Indiana Jones reference to it.
You chose poorly.
So on Twitter this morning, I saw somebody already put together a mashup. Remember at the end of the baseball season when we started playing that mashup of Craig Counsell, Cubs manager Craig Counsell, and all of the sighs and ums and ahs that he puts together, and we'd always joke, now here's a guy you want to run a brick wall through a brick wall for. We already got a mashup. 30 seconds. MLB Network is doing the rounds like they normally do around the Cactus League, and they interviewed Counsell, and some Brewer fan out there already sliced up the first interview with Craig Counsell in spring training. Roll that beautiful, well,
well, it's just what, and it's, yeah, I mean, we're.
I mean, how can you not get fired up? If you play for the Chicago Cubs, new third baseman Alex Bregman, who just signed a boatload, a huge contract in Chicago, let's go. Let's get the Cubs back to relevancy.
Yeah, I mean, we're.
I mean, he just sucks the life out of the room. I don't deny that he's a decent baseball strategist, but he's like a Dementor. He just sucks the spirit right out of you. I had to laugh at that. That already dropped this morning. New Craig Counsell mixtape dropped this morning.
And it's, yeah, I mean, we're.
Unbelievable. So pitchers and catchers reported on Wednesday. We are back, baby. Baseball is back. And actually, most of the Brewer team reported for spring training early. Do we actually have some spring training audio here that just got dropped this morning? I think it did. Hold on. I mean, just hearing the crack of the bat, the ball hitting the mitt. Does my music scare you? There's a reference for you. Does it scare you? But the Brewers report on Wednesday. Most of the team reports. So just a couple of injury updates from Pat Murphy after day one. Quinn Priester, I guess, had a wrist issue he was dealing with at the end of last year. Not dealing with that, but they're going to be slow to ramp him up. Brandon Woodruff, who to me, when you look at the rotation, I know there are going to be gaps to fill, obviously. You traded away Freddie Peralta, who led the National League in wins, who was a top 5 Cy Young finisher this year. That's a pretty big matzo ball that you're going to have to fill up. And while I love the depth, and I love year 2 of Mizorowski on the horizon, and Quinn Priester, year 2 of Quinn Priester, and what we saw from him in year 1, and Chad Patrick and Robert Gasser should be fully healthy this year, and you bring in Kyle Harrison as a part of the trade with Caleb Durbin, and you've got Logan Henderson, top prospect, looked good with a couple of cups of coffee last year. You've got a lot of guys that are going to round out that rotation, and a lot of them have high upside. But when you look at needing a leader in that rotation, now without Freddie Peralta, Brandon Woodruff's got to be that guy. And he was pretty good last year. He missed all of 24 with the major reconstructive shoulder surgery. He came back middle of the year last year. He made 12 starts, went 7-2 with a 3.2 ERA. Pretty damn good numbers considering the injury he was coming back from. His velocity is lower. As we said during the year last year, I do not think he's ever going to be a guy that's consistently 97, 98, 99 anymore. He was more riding in the 92, 93, 94 range, but he made it work. I mean, he basically looked like himself with a little less velocity. I don't think it impacted at all the success that he had. Then he had the lat injury at the end of the year that cost him the postseason again. But he said he physically feels great. Murphy said physically he looks good. They're going to take it slow with him. They've got 7 weeks of ramp-up time here. They're not going to push him into overdrive, obviously. You've got to be careful with him, given the shoulder, given the other injuries he's had in his career. But it is critical, and he knows that. I'm not saying anything Brandon Woodruff doesn't know if he tunes into the podcast. So email me, Brandon, strangebrewpod@AOL.com. I'm not saying anything Brewer fans or he wouldn't know. You need him to be the leader. You need him to be the stabilizer at the top of a rotation now that is trying to replace Freddie Peralta and is finding out what they have behind him. Can Quinn Priester be as good as he was his rookie year? Can Mizorowski be better than he was or get back to what he was at the beginning of his rookie year and then in the playoffs when he had that middle part of the year that did not go well? Can he find more consistency? Is Chad Patrick a starter or is he a reliever? He was a bulldog as a reliever in the playoffs. He started a lot of the year. There's questions there too. Gasser, Harrison, how those guys fit in. Henderson, does he start in AAA? There's a lot of stuff you got to fill out there, but they need Woodruff to be a top of the rotation leader of this team. And to me, that just means making as many starts as you can, taking the ball every 5 days, which is something Freddie did really well over the last 3 years. Last year was statistically his best year by far, But one stat in each of his last 3 years is that he started 30 games or more and threw almost 200 innings in each of those last 3 years. He was a guy you could count on every 5 days. Sometimes he made you want to go insane with the way he attacked hitters in a 2-strike count. But you could rely on him every 5 days to take the ball and way more often than not give you at least a quality start. They need that from Woody this year. He made 12 starts coming back last year. You kind of knew it was going to be an uneven year. That was fine. He looked good, but they need him. I'm not going to say 30 starts because I do think that's reaching a little high, even coming back 2 years now from the shoulder injury. If Brandon Woodruff can make 25 to 27 starts this year, maybe a stint or two short on the IL, but if he can make 25 to 27 starts, and most importantly, if he is healthy in late September and early October, then I think you're really cooking. But they cannot afford, with all the young guys, although I think they could fill those roles to some extent, I don't think they can sustain or absorb a long-term layoff where if he has a major injury and he misses a couple of months, that is going to be tough to overcome. They need Woodruff to be effective. They need him to take the ball every 5 days. And like I said, I'm not going to say 30. I think Freddie made 30-plus or 32 or 33 starts a year in there. I don't know that I'm asking for that. It would be great if he could. I am asking for 25 to 27 starts and hopefully being healthy at the end of the year, which is way more important than I guess anything else. But that's what I want. That's what I think we need from Brandon Woodruff this year. But those were some updates. Now, Murphy did talk about the third base spot, which we talked about on the Monday podcast. You traded away basically every third baseman you had on the roster. So what do you do? As I said, Jet Williams, who they got back in the parole to deal with the Mets, he is major league ready. He could be an option there. We posited on Monday, right, that maybe Williams plays shortstop. You move Ortiz back to third. Could you reshuffle the deck? Could you try Terang again at short? They tried that last year. Didn't work out. I think they just tried it too late in the year. He got arm fatigue. The throw from short to first is just a longer throw than it is from second to first. And it didn't sound like his arm was ready to do that, although he is probably the best defender on the infield that the Brewers possess. Could they try that again? We discussed all of that. Murphy kind of put that to bed right away on Wednesday, saying, my expectation is that Joey Ortiz is the shortstop. Joey Ortiz came in with a beard, by the way. Let's see if Chin Sweater Ortiz, let's see if Joey Chin Sweater can hit with the bases loaded and 2 outs this year. Could the beard be the difference? But Murphy said his expectation is that Ortiz is going to be the starting shortstop, Terang is going to be the starting second baseman, and then he said, we've got a handful of guys that are going to compete for the third base spot. One of them is probably David Hamilton, who came back in the Red Sox deal. One of them is probably Jet Williams, who is naturally a shortstop, but if you can play short, you can play third. If you can play short, you can play anywhere on the infield. So if he is a rising shortstop prospect, which he is, you feel like, okay, we can move him to third base, just like what they did with Ortiz when Adames was still here. But I thought it was interesting that Murphy went out of his way to clarify that right out of the gate and say, Ortiz, shortstop, Terang, second base, and then we're going to have a competition at third base to find out who is going to fill the shoes of Durbin and Monasterio from last year. Now, can he change his mind? And could no one rise to the occasion there? And he ends up maybe making that move midway through spring training where you move Terang to short and you reshuffle the deck a little bit. He could do that. But it was interesting that he went out of his way to say all of that on day one, Wednesday, after that first workout with the team. The other big news yesterday, William Contreras, Wild Bill, he does avoid arbitration. We were all hoping for that. We saw what happened when they went to the arb case with Corbin Burns a few years ago. Feels like they've done that with a lot of their blue chip players, arguing over $600,000 or $500,000. Anytime you can squabble with a franchise player over $600,000 when the Dodgers are paying everybody $200 million, anytime you can do that, you should absolutely do that. I always say that. But they avoid arbitration and sign a 2-year deal. So he's going to make $9.5 this year. There is a team option for $14.5 next year, which I think they're probably going to take. If he has a good year this year, I would think they'll take that next year. He only has 2 years of team control left. As we often discuss, when a player gets called up, they are under team control for 7 years. The first 4 years, you have salary built in, unless you give them a bigger deal like they did with Freddie or Aaron Ashby or Ryan Braun. Those are all built in. And then years 5, 6, and 7, both sides can argue their case and you land on a number. But then after year 7, they become a free agent. Now, as we've gone over ad nauseum with Devin Williams and Corbin and Hader and Peralta was the latest this offseason, Frequently when the Brewers have a star player that is entering the final year of their deal, which is what William Contreras will be doing next year, not this year, but next year, the Brewers have a decision to make. Do we trade this player and sell high and get prospects back and replenish the system and get something for them? Or do we ride into the last year of their deal and potentially lose them at the end of the year for just a draft pick? Or do we do something we don't do often and give that player a long-term extension worth a lot of money? The only two times that's happened recently were Ryan Braun and Christian Yelich. But I am interested. I emoji. I am interested where they feel like William Contreras lands in that conversation. Is he only 27? He might be 28. William Contreras' age. He's 28. And it's clear at this point, he is a franchise-level catcher. He did battle through the hand injury last year. He eventually got some of his power back. He's a guy who's going to hit you 260, 275, 280 on the high side. He's going to knock 20 home runs. He's going to knock in 80 or 90 runs. His OPS is going to hover around 800, and he's been a really good catcher, throwing guys out, frame rate, all that stuff. Took a bit of a hit last year, but I do think the hand injury on his catching hand as a catcher probably played a factor. Take it from me, a podcaster. Probably played a role in that. But he is a franchise catcher. Now, do the Brewers view him that way? Is he going to be one of those rare guys who next year will be 29 years old? Is he going to be a guy they would give a 4 or 5 year deal worth $100+ million, which is probably what it would take after this year? Now, they could pick up his option for next year and see what happens and trade him before the year, trade him at the deadline. They'd have options there. I just wonder where he fits into that scope of, more often than not, the Brewers feel like they have to trade a player like that entering the final year of his deal. Sometimes they ride out that final year and try to win a title. Sometimes they actually give that player a long-term extension. On that tier, I'm not sure where they think Contreras fits. It was interesting they signed Gary Sanchez. Gary's back. Gary Sanchez signed a 1-year, $1.75 million deal. I think, honest to God, I think that's the most money. Most of the moves the Brewers have done this offseason have been trading guys away. I think that's the most money they've spent on a free agent this year, coming off of a 97-win year. I shouldn't laugh, but it is kind of funny. But they bring back Gary Sanchez. He was here in 2024 as Contreras' backup, hit 11 home runs, hit 220, 37 knocked in. Just a solid veteran backup catcher. Went to Baltimore last year. And now he's back. The Brewers do have, or at least had, a blue-chip catching prospect by the name of Jefferson Caro. And Jefferson Caro has been hurt a little bit on and off. He has battled the injury bug. How old is Jefferson Caro? He's got to be 25 now, 24. Oh, he's only 23. Okay, so he's not that old, 23. And we have heard, if you really follow the Brewer minor league system, best minor league system in baseball, put the pennant up. Best minor league system in baseball. We talked last episode about Brock Wilkin and Andrew Fisher, the rising third baseman or corner infielders in the system. Jefferson Caro has been the rising catcher in the system for a while. And I thought that there was a pretty good chance he would start this year as the backup catcher for William Contreras, because it's getting to that point where even with the injuries, it's time to see if this guy can hack it at the major league level. And I thought that's what they would do. The fact that they went and signed a veteran catcher who can play a little first base too, Gary Sanchez, the fact that they spent a little bit of money on a veteran backup catcher makes me believe we are not going to see Jefferson Caro this year. And that makes me question whether or not they still see him as a potential franchise catcher. If they really believe in Caro, there's a chance you would trade after this year William Contreras and you'd say, okay, we have our guy making his way up through the system. But the fact that he is now at 23, probably not going to make the Major League roster with the signing of Sanchez, that means what? That means we don't believe in him. We think he needs more seasoning. We think he needs to prove he can be healthy. I don't know. That would be a question for the scouting department and Matt Arnold. I just thought it was interesting that they signed a backup catcher and gave him a little bit of money, and I think it's unlikely they would cut Sanchez before the year. So that to me means there's some trepidation. There are some questions they have about Jefferson Caro. If there were no questions about Caro and they believe he's the guy, then I do think the likelihood is that you have Contreras this year and then you probably trade him in the offseason. But that's one to watch too. But they came to terms on a deal. That was good news before the full team officially reports early next week. They did release the fan giveaways too. I'll have to go through and take a look. Maybe we'll break that down on the Monday podcast. But this year's cribbage board, remember last year the cribbage board was the big one. Everybody was in line. First 25,000 fans on a Saturday got the Brewer Racing Sausage cribbage board. Luckily, we had a few listeners out there who had one they didn't want, and they just dropped one off because my wife and I couldn't make that game. I think this year's version of the cribbage board is going to be the Brewer logoed bar die. They've got a bar dice set with the Brewer logo on it and the Brewer Cup. I think that's going to be this year's version of the cribbage board. But that was announced this week, too. Single game tickets are on sale today for the Brewers. Is that all the Brewer stuff? I think it's all the Brewer stuff. Okay, now let's talk about the Milwaukee Bucks. What the hell is going on with this team? Are they back?
Every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in.
Is that what's happening? Because as we went over on Monday, 2 weeks ago, on the Monday podcast, they were coming off of getting their doors blown off in Boston. And they were 18-29, and at that time there were a ton of questions as to whether or not Giannis was sticking around. Would he survive the trade deadline? Are we tanking now because clearly we're not making the playoffs, so we may as well lose as many games as possible? If Giannis stays, do you rest him the rest of the year so that it guarantees you lose more games? It's a deep draft. The only hope we have is to get a high draft pick to be a big building block, whether you draft someone and that player becomes a building block, or you use that pick this offseason as a trade to bring in a different big-name player and combo that up somehow, whatever. By 2 weeks ago, it felt like everybody was simpatico in the Bucks universe, in Bucks fandom, that at this point, we're not going anywhere. It's a deep draft. We haven't had a high draft pick in a while. We're probably going to get a top 10 pick, maybe a top 5 or 6 pick. It is time to go Panzer mode. It is time to tank. It's time to lose as much as possible. And then the Bucks start winning. So at the beginning of the year, we said, please win, Bucks. We love you. Please win. And the Bucks said, no, we're not going to win. And then we said, okay, fine. Then just lose. Then keep doing what you're doing and lose. And the Bucks have said, no, we're not going to do that either. I'm not going to do what you want me to do either way. I don't know what to make of this team at this point. So we said on the Monday podcast this week, going into Monday night in Orlando. Remember, on the Monday podcast, we said they got 3 wins last week, first 3-game winning streak of the year. They beat the Bulls, the Pelicans, and the Pacers, all bad teams. The Bulls, a selling team, and then 2 last-place teams in New Orleans and Indiana. And we said on the Monday podcast, we are going to learn this week with at Orlando, an above 500 playoff team right now on Monday, at Orlando again on Wednesday, and at Oklahoma City, the defending champions and the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. I said we're going to learn whether or not that 3-game winning streak was just an aberration and the Bucks taking advantage of a soft part in their schedule, or are we going to learn this week that they're going to actually build some momentum and maybe turn this thing around? Well, they lose on Monday, and they had a halftime lead. They lose 118-99. The loss on Monday made them 3-21 in their last 24 games against teams above 500. So after Monday, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, it was all an illusion last week. They were bad. They beat bad teams at home. They beat a selling team. They beat a last-place team. They beat a last-place team after they kept Giannis after the trade deadline. Okay, we're back to tank mode. And they lost that game by 19 or 20 on Monday, again, despite having a halftime lead. So then on Wednesday, still no Giannis, out with the calf injury, and then no Ryan Rollins on Wednesday. So he has a foot injury. He has plantar fasciitis or whatever. That's probably not good. So then I'm thinking Wednesday morning when they make that announcement, okay, they're going to lose another game in Orlando, and then for sure they're losing in Oklahoma City on Thursday, and we are fully back into tank mode. Well, the Bucks went out there on Wednesday, and they played one of the best games they've played this year at Orlando on Wednesday. And right in the middle of that, leading the charge in a 116-108 win in Orlando on Wednesday, were the 2 newcomers. The guy they got at the deadline, Ousmane Dieng, and the guy they signed after he was cut by the Nets, Cam Thomas. Now, we talked about Cam Thomas on Monday. He's an interesting guy, 24 years old, still super young. Clearly, as the kids say, he's a bucket. And what does that mean? It means he can score a ton. If he gets the shots, he is going to score. He's a bucket. Was he a problem in the locker room in Brooklyn with a bad Brooklyn team? Maybe. Was he a bit of a ball hog? Did he dribble the air out of the ball? Maybe. Those were the knocks against him, and that is why, as we discussed on Monday, that is why a 24-year-old who averaged better than 20 points per game over the last 3 years, that is why he was free. That is why it didn't cost a draft pick. It didn't even cost a second-round pick, which, as we've been over, regenerates spontaneously throughout the course of the year. They cut him, and the Bucs signed him for the rest of the year, so they got him basically for free. And as we said on Monday, it's not a bad flyer. He is going to be in search of a bigger deal somewhere next year. And for that reason, he's probably going to put his best foot forward. And the Bucs do have a need for a guard who can score consistently and knock down shots consistently, so why not give it a chance? Well, Cam Thomas proved on Wednesday why he is a bucket. In 25 minutes, Cam Thomas scored 34 points on 12 of 20 shooting, 4 of 6 from beyond the arc, also had 4 rebounds and a couple of assists. He went crazy. And he just showed why. When he comes into a game, he can have a night where he scores 30 in a blink. And then also on Wednesday, Ousmane Dieng had 17 points and knocked down 5 threes in 23 minutes on Wednesday. They led the charge off the bench. They had 48 combined or whatever it was. Hold on, that's not the right math. Let me do math here. 51 combined points off the bench. And Kevin Porter Jr. was great. He had a triple-double, 18, 10, 11. Jericho Sims, out of nowhere, had 17 points and 11 rebounds on 6 of 6 shooting. So there were some of those contributions too. But Dieng and Cam Thomas led the way. And coming out of Wednesday, a lot of Bucs Twitter, myself included, we're talking about how, okay, maybe Cam Thomas is going to work out, and maybe Ousmane Dieng is something. Now, remember after the trade deadline, the Friday podcast after the trade deadline, we talked about Ousmane Dieng. Ousmane Dieng, when I saw what they got in him on Thursday afternoon last week, so Friday morning's podcast, a 22-year-old who is 6'9" with a big wingspan. He fits a need. The Bucs have not had a wing player like that since Chris Middleton in his prime. And Middleton wasn't even that tall. He was 6'7", 6'8". They have not had a good wing player in a long, long time. And I said on the Friday podcast, I am intrigued. I said, I think I also said, I don't think he's going to be a game changer, but I am intrigued by a 6'9" wing who is only 22 years old, who in 2022 was the 11th overall pick in the draft. There has to be a reason that a team viewed him as the 11th overall pick in the draft. Now, the problem for Ousmane Dieng is that he got drafted in Oklahoma City, and they are loaded. They have the most talented roster in the NBA, and there was no playing time for him at 19, 20, 21 years old. So my thinking, and a lot of Bucs fans thought this on Twitter, okay, you get a 22-year-old former number 11 overall pick. He's been buried on the depth chart in Oklahoma City. He is going to play for us because we have a need, and at this point, we were still in tank mode, so we're thinking, why not throw him out there every game, 25, 30 minutes a night, just to see what you have? Find out whether or not this is something or whether this is nothing, and have that knowledge heading into the offseason. So Dieng goes out there and scores 17 on Wednesday. And I watched that game, and it was not a fluke. Sometimes you can tell if you watch a lot of NBA games or college basketball games, in between college games, watching them and calling them and all the NBA games. I probably watch 200 games a year. Way more than I should be. I call games, and then I come home and watch college basketball. That's where I'm at with basketball. So you can kind of tell if this is an outlier, if this guy's playing above his skis, or if this looks real. And to me, the Wednesday performance in Orlando for Ousmane Dieng looked real. That looked like a player who knew what he was doing. He looked confident. It wasn't like he was rattling in those shots. They were pure. They were step backs. He had an idea of what he was doing. Okay, so we get to Thursday. And they're at Oklahoma City. And as I just said, the Thunder are the reigning champions. They are the number 1 seed in the West. They are loaded. Now, they did not have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander last night, the reigning MVP. They did not have Jalen Williams, an all-star. So they were shorthanded. But the Bucs didn't have Giannis, didn't have Ryan Rollins again, and didn't have Miles Turner, who was a late scratch on Wednesday. So a shorthanded Bucs team against a shorthanded Thunder team in Oklahoma City. No Doc last night. He was attending a funeral, so Darvin Ham was the head coach last night. Could it stay that way, maybe? And I'll be damned if the Bucs don't go out there and they smoke them. I mean, the game got a little close in the third quarter, but they came out aggressively defensively. They hit Oklahoma City in the mouth, and they win 110-93. I don't care that they didn't have SGA or Jalen Williams. The Bucks didn't have Giannis Turner or Ryan Rollins. Bucks had an 18-point first-half lead, led by 12 at halftime. OKC got it under 10 a few times in the third quarter, but every time they did, the Bucks had a counterpunch. They had a response. So last night, they put Dieng in the starting lineup. He plays 36 minutes. He scores 19 points against his former team on 7 of 12 shooting, knocks down 3 more threes. He has 11 rebounds. He has 6 assists and no turnovers. He also has 4 blocks and a steal. Now, those numbers, don't say I'm saying this, okay? Don't tell the paper I'm mad. Don't say I'm saying this. But that stat line for Ousmane Dieng at 22 years old, as kind of a tall, lanky guy who hasn't gotten a strong look yet and who's a little green, 19-11 with 6 assists, 4 blocks, and a steal. Does that remind you of any freakish player at 21, 22 years old? That reminds me very much of a 21-year-old Giannis stat line. Ousmane Dieng is not going to be Giannis. He is not going to be an all-time great. However, I am starting to believe, and it's only a 2 or 3 game sample, but I am starting to think he might be a real piece. And that was a trade at the deadline that got 0 airtime. Nobody talked about it. That got no oxygen. Nobody talked about that trade. And honestly, even us, even though I said I was intrigued by it, I did not think this. I did not think we'd be coming off of back-to-back games in Orlando and in Oklahoma City where all of a sudden I'm thinking, not only could Ousmane Dieng be something, could he be a building block heading into next year? Because if you've got a 6'9", 22-year-old wing who can do this, and I guess we'll see what happens when Giannis comes back. How is Giannis going to fit into all of this? How does Dieng play with Giannis? We're going to find that out probably in a week and a half, and maybe it doesn't look as good as it looks now. That's a possibility. But it is kind of looking like they may have found something in Ousmane Dieng and Cam Thomas. Now, Cam Thomas was quieter last night, had 12 points off the bench, still good. Pete Nance was good last night. He's been getting more playing time, 11.7 boards. I'll say this about John Horst, the Bucks GM. I do not think John Horst has been great with putting contracts together. I do not think he's been good in the draft. In fact, everybody thinks and knows he has not been good in the draft. There are 2 things that John Horst does really well. Number 1, he is a Giannis whisperer. He has an ability to sell Giannis on the future of the team, the plan he has going forward. This past trade deadline was not the first time Horst had to sell Giannis on a plan moving forward, and he's been able to do that at every turn. So his number 1 attribute is Giannis whisperer. One thing John Horst is really good at, if he's not good at the draft and he's not great in free agency, he is excellent at thrift shopping. And by that I mean he finds guys that no one else is looking at. He brings them in on G League contracts, 2-way contracts, and they turn into something. A.J. Green was an undrafted rookie free agent. Ryan Rollins was an undrafted rookie free agent. Pete Nance was an undrafted rookie free agent. Ousmane Dieng is a young player who's been buried on a depth chart who clearly has some upside to him. So while he's not the best drafter in the world, and he's not the best contract free agent guy in the world, he is pretty good at trades. Okay, I'll give him that too. The Jrue Holiday trade, the Dame trade, even though it didn't work out, he's pretty creative with trades, but he is really good at like NBA American Pickers. Like that show where American Pickers go through people's garages and sheds and they find all this treasure in there that everybody thought was junk. He is an NBA version of the American Picker guys. He is excellent at that. So I don't know what this means now for the Bucks. They are 23-30 on the year. All of a sudden, they're a game back of the last play-in tournament spot. They are even in the loss column with Atlanta, who right now have that last spot. They're the 10 seed. Atlanta is tanking, it feels like. The Bulls are tanking, and those are the only 2 teams in between the Bucks and a play-in tournament spot. And it sounds like Giannis is coming back next week, probably when they start the second half in New Orleans against the last-place team on Friday night next week. So if Ousmane Dieng is something, and Cam Thomas is something that works for this team, and then you get Giannis back, I think this team is going to make the play-in tournament, and I don't know what that means. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I had committed myself to the tank and a top 10 pick and maybe a top 5 pick, but now you win 5 of 6, and the bottom of the East is terrible, and you're about to get Giannis back, and maybe you found this diamond in the rough in Ousmane Dieng and Cam Thomas. I think we're back. I think the Bucks might be back, and I thought they were deader than dead. And this week has been incredible. I mean, the Wednesday and Thursday in Orlando and in OKC, with no Giannis, no Rollins, and no Miles Turner last night, these are 2 of the best wins of the year, and the guys leading them to wins are good young players, it seems like. I don't know what to make of it. What a weird year. But I think Giannis will be back for that game next Friday. Now, it's All-Star Weekend in the NBA. He is not playing in the game. He is coaching Shams in the celebrity game, and Bobby Portis will be a part of the three-point shooting competition on Saturday night. He is shooting 45% from beyond the arc, career best this year. That is Saturday night. Now, real quick, not a lot to hit on here. Badger basketball, massive game tonight. They went to number 8 Illinois and won on Tuesday in overtime, 92-90. What a bounce back. After getting screwed at Assembly Hall on Saturday, they come back and beat a top 10 team on the road. Greg Gard now has that team at 17-7. They are 9-4 in the Big Ten, and they have arguably the 2 best road wins of any team in college basketball. They beat number 2 Michigan on the road. That is still the only loss Michigan has. And they beat number 8 Illinois in overtime on the road. I get that Illinois was down a few key parts on Tuesday. I don't care. Badger road win against a top 10 team, against Illinois, that's a huge win. Those are 2 of the best road wins in college basketball this year, and they are in the tournament. They could lose, I think, the rest of their games now, and they're in based on those 2 wins. So tonight, you could cap off one of the biggest weeks in Greg Gard's era as head coach. If you knock off number 8 Illinois on the road on Tuesday, and then you come back and beat number 10 Michigan State at home on Friday, that is a hell of a week. That is tonight at the Kohl Center, a 7 o'clock tip time. And then real quick in NASCAR, I just have to get you our pick. As I've talked about before, I am not a NASCAR guy. I try. I just can't stick with it. It's a long year. I understand there's some hypocrisy in the fact that the guy who can watch 162 baseball games over 6.5 months is saying that a different sport is too long. I get that there is some hypocrisy there, okay? Hand up. And Matt LaFleur, hand up. It's on me. I've tried. I've been in NASCAR fantasy leagues. I just can't stick with it. But I do ask, because the B93 audience is much better versed in NASCAR than I am. And I just like to gamble on the Daytona race. I love to watch Daytona 500. That's like the only race I watch every year, maybe Talladega. And I like to bet on it. As you know, I like to dabble in the entertainment points. So I asked the B-Text line who they think is going to be the outright winner. We landed on Ryan Blaney. I had Denny Hamlin's the favorite. William Byron is going for a 3rd straight win, which has never happened in the history of the Daytona 500. He won in 24 and 25. So he's in the mix, but Ryan Blaney, I think, has the 3rd or 4th best odds to win. He is 11-1. Ryan Blaney is our Daytona 500 pick per the B93 text line. All right, that'll do it for us here on your Friday. This is a long podcast. We will get back after it. On Monday, we'll recap All-Star Weekend. We will recap, perhaps, if we won the Ryan Blaney bet in Daytona. Any Brewer updates, and we'll talk a little bit about what happened in All-Star Weekend. Did I say that already for the NBA? It's time for this podcast to end. Have a happy, safe weekend. Have a happy Valentine's weekend. Have a happy fall, spring weekend. We'll chat with you Monday.